Hello, I am Morris Sogom, Regional Director for Iran and Iraq at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Let me welcome everyone who has joined us in today's discussion. With me here in Prague is Hanna Kaviani. Hanna is an Iranian journalist at Radio Farda, which is the broadcasting and web service of RFE-RL. As you know, today's discussion is about Iranian public opinion and the nuclear talks. Hannah has been with Radio Farda since 2008. She has been, of course, covering various issues related to Iran, but specifically, she has been following the nuclear negotiations in the past year and a half. She has been field reporting from Geneva and Vienna, and really, we can say she's an expert on these negotiations. And from New York, Negar Mortazari joins us. Hello, Negar, and welcome, and thank you for sparing time for this discussion.
Thanks for having me.
She's an Iranian American journalist and media analyst based in New York. Negar has been following Iranian politics and society since 1999. She was a bilingual broadcast journalist at Voice of America, and currently she's in New York following, again, Iranian politics, society, and media. We can say that Negar really is an expert on Iranian activism on social media, and as we know, Iranians are really, really active. Iranian cyberspace is huge and very vital. Thank you, both of you. Before we go to the first question, I would like to ask everyone to submit their questions and comments, make this event more informative and livelier. You can use Twitter, hashtag RFERLive. I repeat, RFERLive. Or send us a message on Facebook. Also make sure you check out our website regularly, rferl.org, and our Facebook pages in various languages. You can get the latest news and analysis from Iran, Iraq, Russia, from the Ukraine crisis, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. Okay, so let's start with the first question. Basically, we know that in Iran, there is no independent, reliable public opinion polling system. Therefore, internet is the most fresh and measurable instrument for gauging Iranian public opinion on various issues. You both follow Iranian social media, Iranian cyberspace very closely. How divided is the Iranian society on the nuclear issue? Do people want their country to gain or get a huge victory, a triumph as a nuclear weapons capable state? Or do they want to end this isolation and they want to break out of economic hardship, get jobs, and basically live more normal lives? Negar, please go first.
Just like you were saying, Marta, public opinions are very rare in Iran or even non-existent. So social media has eventually become this tool to sort of get a sense of what's happening on the ground and what people think. And it's interesting that people also themselves realize that, so they take even more to social media to voice their opinion and be very vocal and strong. And I would say especially during the past year, since the negotiations got, let's say, a restart and got serious, and there was this feeling that they might get somewhere, people have been following them very closely. The overwhelming majority that you see on social media is hopeful. People are looking for a comprehensive deal. As you were saying, it has a very direct effect on their livelihoods, on their economic situation. The isolation has really cornered Iran from the world, and Iran needs this re-engagement with the world, with the West, and especially with the U.S., because, as Hannah can tell us, she's been in negotiations. U.S. is the most important player, and that's basically the most important comment that you see from people on social media is how Iran and US are playing it together in these negotiations, and how people are looking up to these negotiators to basically start this re-engagement and end this isolation of Iran and bring it back to the world. As far as wanting the country to be a nuclear weapons capable country, I don't see that much in public opinion. I mean, there's always radicals on social media from all sides of the spectrum, but we see that even the leaders basically never publicly state that they want nuclear weapons. So it's not something that you see much in the public opinion, whereas you see more of a distrust towards the Western side of the negotiation from people who are more on the conservative side, saying we can't trust these negotiations and the negotiations are not going to get anywhere. But the majority, I would say, are positive, are hopeful, and they want a deal.
So they have certain clear expectations to improve engagement with the West.
Definitely. With the West and then with the world.
World community. Yeah, I agree with Nagar, but I think I can add what we have as asset here at RFE, which is the audience that contact us from Iran and around the world. I was especially trying to look into what we received during the past 2 weeks from inside the country, from and through phone or SMS. I would say that, like everything else, Iran is quite a diverse society, and it's not like a black and white story. There is a very big gray area in the middle, because you also, when people are generally, it's clear, they're suffering from the sanctions, they're suffering from the economic situation, which is not necessarily only because of sanctions. It was 8 years of mismanagement in the economy. When you look at this, you see that, okay, they want engagement, they want having a better life, and this welfare is an issue. But at the same time, here it becomes divided, the opinions, where some see these negotiations as a plus for the Islamic Republic. They would see it as something which is going to benefit the system, and therefore they are against it. We have many messages in this way, but there are at the same time those who think that they contact us and they say, like, okay, we want a deal because we think that this is going to help the situation with the system, therefore it's going to help the situation with people.
The die-hard rejectionists of the Islamic Republic actually are not happy if the negotiations succeed, because they think the sanctions would lead to regime change.
Yes, this is one issue. The other issue, for example, we hear a lot of people calling and saying that, yeah, this sanction relief based on the initial agreement, this temporary agreement which was done in Geneva last year, they say like this sanction relief is not good because the Iranian regime is going to use this money to spend it for the Shia groups
Syria and
in other countries. So there is definitely, at least from what I understand, the majority of people are in favor of putting an end to this thing, but at the same time, when it comes to how to put an end and what's going to result, they have very diverse ideas.
Thanks. Negar, tell us about your efforts to start a broad discussion on the nuclear talks on Iranian social media forums. That's interesting to know your first-hand experience recently.
Sure. So as you know, I'm very active on Twitter. I'm always on Twitter, especially around the nuclear talks. And that's where a lot of young Iranians especially take to get their news, to follow journalists like Hannah who go to Vienna and Geneva to cover the talks. And you see a lot of basically opinions flying in the air, speculations, people hopes and despair, and all basically the general mood that's happening. You see a projection of that on social media. So I'm usually monitoring that around the times of the talks. I try to disseminate the news as much as I get it. And it's very interesting to see how Iranians are trying to follow the news as well as trying to engage even with some of the diplomats, with some of the media, and basically voice their opinion of what they think should be happening. And I mean, it's just a very unique experience that I think Iranians are spearheading among other nations in social media. And again, like I said, the majority of the sense that I get, especially from young people inside Iran, is that they were positive, especially during the last round of negotiations. The mood that was coming from Vienna, even though there was very limited information, but the mood seemed positive and hopeful. And a lot of people I saw wrote on Twitter that they even expected some kind of agreement to come out of it. And I think some people were disappointed that it didn't happen, but again, still hopeful that it's going on and
That
it
would be
fail and end.
the next question. If there was disappointment, or there is, I think, a mixture of disappointment but also hope, because from everything we have heard since the end of the negotiations from both sides, has been that the gap has really narrowed.
Definitely. So, I mean, there was definitely a sense of disappointment because when you have hope for something to happen and when you want it to happen and it doesn't, you get disappointed. But I think a lot of people after the news was announced still got a positive side of it, that at least the negotiations didn't end. They didn't fail. They didn't leave the room. So I think people are still hopeful that it will happen. I see some disappointment still floating around on social media, people saying they've been negotiating for a long time and it's never going to get anywhere. They're just going to negotiate for the sake of negotiation. But like I said, this is a restart of a decade of negotiations, and I think people still haven't lost hope for it to come to an end.
I just want to remind our friends who have joined us that please send your questions and comments to us on Twitter using hashtag RFER Live. RFER Live. Or ask your questions or put your comments on our Facebook page. Come on, join the discussion. Ask a question. Hannah, you were in Vienna during the last round of the talks. When the talks ended with the decision that we all know about, what did you feel there among diplomats, participants, or even journalists who were there? Was there optimism or pessimism?
Well, actually, from the beginning of this round of talk on November 18th, uh, from day one or two, I would say that it was clear that the deadline is for reaching a comprehensive deal, and that deal is not going to be there. This was clear, and most of the journalists and analysts who were on the ground, they knew that this is not going to happen. But I would say that there was a common mood, as Negar was saying on the social media. There was a sense of disappointment too, because extension for 7 months was quite surprising. Continuation of JPOA was kind of surprising. And in a way, many people were going around the idea of let's have a political agreement, at least a framework or something which would have been like a bigger step. Why is that? Because most of the journalists, analysts who were on the ground, also diplomats, negotiators, they were quite aware that selling an extension back home, not only to the politicians back home, but to the public is also a problem. It's not going to be very easy for Zarif to go back to Iran and say like, okay, now we have an extension. And the other issue is that I would say they set the expectations quite high for this round. That's why not only I'm sure Negar saw it on the social media, but at the same time it was also an issue that the Iranian negotiators, they came, and Zarif, while entering Vienna, said that 24th, either way, is going to be a national victory for us. If we win it, or if we get a deal, or if we don't get a deal. And then, without a deal, without not getting a deal, and only an extension, it was kind of a disappointment that what happened. and generally, when you are there after 7, 8 days, you follow this for, I mean, 24/7. You're following it. For journalists, there were more than 400 of them this time in Vienna. It was quite hard to digest in the first hours. I'm sure when everybody went back home, they thought more about it. That what was it and how was it, and how Negar was saying that at the end, many interpret it in this way that okay, at least this is going to continue, but many jokingly, the journalists who are covering this for many years now, they were like, okay, is it going to finish with a deal at least until I have all my hair gray or until the end of my life? So there is a sense of desperation. Everybody's waiting for it to
Or
happen, and
something
it
to happen.
doesn't. Yeah,
I'll mention one point and move on to another observation. The point is that a few days ago, Zarif, speaking optimistically, he again used the word framework, not a final deal. Very soon we can reach agreement on a framework for a
because
deal.
they set the deadline for a framework until March. So basically, the first deadline is not June, it's March.
March.
And by then, they have to get to a framework, a political agreement. And Secretary of State John Kerry said it at the end of this round of talks that this is the first 4 months that they have to get to a political agreement. Otherwise, then they have to think what they have to do, because it shows that if they can't make it in this first 4 months, it's kind of difficult to get it in 7 months. So yeah, they are actually, one thing was very interesting, and that is, I have to say, they didn't get an agreement this time in Vienna, but they very well agreed to sell the optimism and the way forward to the public.
You think so?
Yeah, and they were really like, they came out, all of them, from the French foreign minister to Iranian foreign minister. This is a very wide spectrum of ideas, and they almost came out and said the same thing. So I think they agreed on this issue quite well.
Because that increases the chances of further progress, I
Sure.
guess.
Sure.
Considering opposition in your home front.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You mentioned, when you were speaking earlier, Hannah, you mentioned the huge flow of people's messages to Radio Farda. I would like our friends to know that besides social media, Radio Farda receives something like 150,000 direct messages from Iran every year. So you can imagine on a weekly basis those emails, SMS messages, and phone messages that we receive. However, we use also a bi-weekly polling, which on different issues on the website. And there was a remarkable shift around after the negotiations. On a poll we posted on Radio Farda's website in Persian, and the poll was asking this: are you more pessimistic or optimistic after hearing about the extension? Previously, when we asked questions about optimism or pessimism on the nuclear talks, the overwhelming majority was pessimistic, until recently. But this time, 55% was pessimistic, 45% was optimistic. So almost the public was divided 50-50, we can say. And I realized that was a big change.
And how many people were participating?
I think the final number of people who voted was more than 4,000.
Okay.
So that was it. Although we cannot guarantee that all of them were from Iran, it's very hard to say because our website is blocked in Iran. So actually many people use proxies, circumvention tools to reach our website, and therefore Google Analytics or other tools have a problem filtering and exactly seeing how many people come from Iran. But I'm sure that a significant number of these 4,000 votes were from Iran. And then Iranian society is close-knit. Even the diaspora Iranians are in constant touch with their relatives and friends in Iran, and especially on cyberspace. Basically, the mutual grasp of facts or impressions, mutual impressions, are very intermingled.
Mhm.
It's not that diaspora is very different from the homeland in terms of um, why do you think that the mood among the informed people, or at least people who follow news, shifted so positively, Negar?
Um, I think this shift towards positiveness has, again, as I said, started since last year, since they came to the interim agreement and something positive came out of the negotiations after almost a decade. So people started paying attention and being like, oh, so negotiations can actually go somewhere. So that shift started, but again, like Hannah was saying, the diplomats, especially in this very last round, they were very successful in portraying a positive image of we didn't reach an agreement, but we are going to, basically was what the sense was. So I think it's just the combination of a feeling of hope for Iranians is very important, the feeling of need that they want these negotiations to succeed so this problem is solved. And also I think there's the trust. The new negotiating team has been a lot more successful than the previous one. I feel like people have more faith and more trust in Zarif and his team, and I also see a lot of positive imaging around Zarif on people who comment on social media. So I think it's a combination of the capabilities of these negotiators, hope, and also people's need for change. When you want something to happen, then you're more likely to think that it's going to happen, I guess.
Yeah, I think the aspect of the government very much trying to it's winter to sell this at home in a I'm sorry. Yeah,
You want the water?
I think I need it. Thank you. Yeah, sorry.
Don't
I
worry.
think I think I need to run and cough very fast. Sorry.
I can take on the government if you want.
Negar, a question came in that I wanted to ask Hannah, but until she returns,
Sure.
how did the Iranian media cover this? One of the people following the discussion is asking.
It's interesting because I follow U.S. media very closely and also Iranian media, and people in the U.S. think that Iranian nuclear negotiations make headlines, and it's true. It becomes an important part of foreign news. But in Iran, it's just front page covers of almost all newspapers, especially during the time of the negotiations. I would say Iranian media follow it religiously. They cover it religiously because people are following it religiously, staying up very late at night, watching the television and all the newspapers. And Hannah can tell us about the big number of Iranian journalists that come from Iran every time to cover the negotiations. And it's very extensive. And I think an interesting observation that I made this very recently was that the two sides of the spectrum are sort of waiting for a deal. I mean, one side, the radicals, don't want it to happen, obviously, and the reformists or the moderates or the liberals, they want it to happen. But I feel like the radicals also somewhat expected that it would happen, and when it didn't, it was a sort of like a victory of, oh, we didn't expect to win, but we did, and the agreement didn't happen. But overall, I would say Iranian media covers it very closely, and from the results that we see. And
Uh,
Hannah can talk about the journalists who were there.
my impression has been that the Iranian media, per se, doesn't particularly itself take a position, but they reflect statements by hardliners. More, that's what you see, or the opposite, the optimism of the government.
Well, it depends on which newspaper, which outlet we're talking about. It's also a very diverse matter. But what is important here is that I think we have to especially mention this part of the story, that the number of journalists who are coming from inside the country to cover these negotiations in Vienna and in Geneva, it was the same, but it's growing and growing. From what I heard from journalists who come from Iran is that, first of all, this was very much of an initiative from the side of Iranian Foreign Ministry. Uh, I can imagine that it had very, I would say, any state would want to win a media war. Therefore, they were very much absent, and now they decided that, okay, we need to have enough journalists on the ground. Even on this last round, the 5+1 didn't have a spokesperson on the ground, and Iranian Foreign Ministry brought the female spokesperson to brief these journalists on the background. And so it shows that they are very much trying, and also it is basically the most important thing which Iran is kind of like dealing with right now, and obviously the media is trying to be there and to try to cover it. But at the same time, this is a very personal observation of mine since last year in Geneva and now in these past rounds in Vienna, is that these kind of experiences for journalists when they are coming from Iran, from this country, that it's not every day that you can sit next to an American journalist, an Israeli journalist, a German journalist, or an Iranian journalist like myself from a non-Iranian outlet. It's not every day that this can happen. And the experience, maybe not in the first day, but general process, it can affect the worldview of this certain journalist who's looking at this issue. And she or he will have the chance to discuss this with many different analysts who are on the ground, which is happening all the time in these press rooms, and they are discussing it. They're discussing it with other journalists, not necessarily from Iran, and this helps that the journalistic sphere of Iran would come out of a certain amount of isolation, which exists, which you can see that it exists. Because in this past year, I would say that things have changed in the way that even people say hi to each other, let alone the way they're discussing and analyzing this very complicated issue. Because there is another thing in Iranian media, especially, I would want to focus on this part too, and that is the fact that Iranian officials, I have a feeling, know it well too, that the coverage of these nuclear negotiations have been quite problematic inside the country because of the lack of information, not necessarily background information, but technical issues or very simple things, which if it would have been practiced in the right way, it would have helped this procedure. Because one of the things that I think Iranian nuclear issue has generally the problem, not only inside Iran, but general worldwide, is that it is the type of coverage that it has seen through the past decade, and the analysis has not been helping this process. And it is very important for the journalists to get the things right and to put them together in the right way.
Do we have a question? Okay. Well, just picking up the thread of your last thought or idea, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, last week said that enough is enough, right? That the government and the negotiating team and the negotiating plan has his blessing.
Yeah.
And people should hold their tongues. That certainly has changed or will change the domestic scene a bit.
Well, not generally. This is basically something which is going from public opinion a bit more to the political arena of Iran, let's say, that yes, because Zarif, as foreign minister and the chief negotiator, he was supposed to go to a public hearing at the parliament the next day that he was already having a private conversation with the MPs. And then the Supreme Leader's comments came, and that certain session was cancelled or postponed, because this is the thing that it changes, it shifts how it is being sold. I mean, when we talked about, for example, the public opinion and people staying a bit hopeful still about a possible deal, was a very interesting phenomena a night before 24th, that on social media, on Instagram, I'm sure Negar has seen it, on Rouhani's account posts a picture of it's written hope in Farsi, and he's walking under it, and it's trying to still place this public opinion in the way that, okay, let's stay hopeful, we can do this.
Negar, what do you think the policy of the Iranian government is vis-a-vis handling the public opinion? Is there just one policy, you think, or the supreme leader and the government have different policies?
The supreme leader being Iran's top hardliner, a lot of people expect to be in the opposite camp, but I think it's unprecedented, like the comment that you mentioned, and the general mood from the supreme leader's office, that overall it seems like the government and the negotiating team have the blessing of the supreme leader to make a deal. Now, the extent of the concessions that they can make are still in question, but in general, the feeling is that the supreme leader wants a deal, wants to come out of the sanctions specifically. And that's basically what the government, President Rouhani, ran on for his campaign on in the presidential election in 2013. And I would say his top priority in foreign policy, and one of his most important promises, was to resolve this issue and to have its effect on the economy and get a boost. So I would say the government and parts of the hardline camp want a deal. The extent of the concessions are different, but there's always radicals on the hardline camp that are very publicly opposing the negotiations and a deal. And a lot of people argue that that's one voice that's coming out of the supreme leader. He has this supporting the government voice, and he has this opposing the negotiations voice, and it's basically given him the chance of covering the entire base. So whatever comes out of the negotiations, he's going to be the winner.
Let's look at it this way. What I'm thinking is that maybe Rouhani's government is raising public expectations, because that in its own right would boost his negotiating position vis-a-vis the hardliners.
Definitely, I agree. Basically, like I was saying, when people feel he made this promise, and then he feeds off of people's hope and the need for a deal, and that would definitely strengthen his hand as far as negotiating inside the country against the hardliners, because he constantly repeats it when we see in his public speeches that this is what the people wanted, this is why people voted for him, and this is what he's going to achieve. And he said numerously, very strongly, that they're going to reach a final agreement.
Okay, thank you. If you have any more comments or want to discuss something, go ahead. We have a little bit of time left. Otherwise, I would like to say thank you to all those who joined us. Please tell your friends that they can watch the recorded version of this conversation on YouTube. And don't forget, for your daily news and analysis on Iran and other hot topics, such as Iraq, Syria, Ukraine, please visit our website, rferl.org. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Please, thank you.